Welcome to Fintech Talks. My name is Sanjib, and I'm so excited to be here today with Phil Goldfeder from American Fintech Council. Phil, would you mind just giving a quick introduction about yourself?
Sure. First and foremost, thank you to Sanjib, to the entire Fintech Meetup team. Fintech Meetup is one of the highlights of our year at the American Fintech Council, outside of our own policy summit, of course. But we love sort of the idea of not just conference for conference sake, right? But really try to build meaningful relationships. And that's what Fintech Meetup is all about. My name is Phil Goldfeder. I'm the CEO of the American Fintech Council, which is a trade association that is standards-based, that represents both sides of the financial services ecosystem, both the innovative banks as well as the innovative fintech companies, all across the spectrum. Today, we're more than 150 members strong of financial services innovators who are not just innovating for the sake of finding new ways to offer consumer goods, but they're innovating to change the future of financial services. And the American Fintech Council is here to help create that connectivity, to build opportunities for companies to come together, but also to have meaningful impact in Washington, D.C. and in states across the country. Proud to say that in 2025, AFC was on the ground in more than 25 different states, in addition to the work we're doing in Washington, D.C. So really excited for the organization, excited for our members, excited for our growth, and more importantly, we're all here to try and change the world when it comes to financial services.
Oh, that's great. And that's a great background about the organization. When did AFC first start?
AFC is about 5 years old.
Okay.
I've led the organization for about 3 years. In the last 3 years, we've gone from just shy of 30 members, as I mentioned earlier, to just north of 150 members. You know, at one point representing just a couple of verticals. Today, I think we touch every single aspect of the fintech ecosystem. As I mentioned, innovative banks, online lenders, earned wage access, buy now, pay later, payments companies, software and regulatory technology companies, and everybody in between. And so, you know, part of what we've built is our ability to influence policy and build for the future, but also create that collaborative ecosystem that I think is sort of why we get along with Fintech Meetups, you know, so well, is because it's really about real connectivity. How do we bring people together to have meaningful conversations and build something? And that's something that we really believe in at the American Fintech Council.
That's amazing. And you know, just a bit of background. I spent 9 years at Citibank, for example, and used to launch product. Look, so for example, in the early days of prepaid, I was in charge of launching a prepaid card, and the legal and regulatory landscape was so fractured, you know, across all 50 states, and even at the federal level, it was like I would have loved to have had some help in figuring out some of these big questions. And like, what might be some of the big questions that the industry is facing right now that you know your organization is helping with?
Yeah, you know, it's funny because it's always a snapshot in a moment of time, right? You think about what today is and what the priorities of today. If we talk again tomorrow, it's likely to shift. And if we talked yesterday, it was probably a bit different. I think right now we're thinking about, as we're going into November in just a couple of weeks, leading into 2026, we're starting to think about state legislative sessions and what states are priorities and where we should start thinking about how we're going to reach out to those states. Obviously, being based in DC and focusing on DC, the shutdown is very, very real. Just this week, we responded to a request from the Committee on Financial Services in the House, talking about how is fintech stepping up to meet the needs of federal employees and contractors and service members who may be without a paycheck, and how fintech can be a real answer to people who are struggling to meet ends meet, especially during the government shutdown. And so, again, it really depends on the day. It depends on what's bubbling and what's percolating. And our goal is to be proactive as much as possible, but oftentimes we're being reactive to what's happening around us and the shifting ecosystem.
And with some of these large questions, and having a large set of companies that are part of the AFC, like how much of it is basically trying to like manage the communication versus, you know, trying to help shepherd some policy?
It's a great question. And people always ask me how somebody who has a political and public policy background, I served as an elected official right here in New York, how does that translate into fintech? And I would argue that makes me uniquely qualified to run a trade association, because sort of the diplomacy, the idea of trying to build collaborative ways forward, even when companies disagree. oftentimes fintech is called, is known as democratizing financial services. I like to think that we've democratized the trade association where everybody gets an opportunity to weigh in, to have an opinion, and to shape the policies and the agenda for the American Fintech Council so that it's not about any one company's desire to grow themselves. It's about the larger ecosystem and the consumers that are being served and the future of financial services. And so, I'm often called naive for this, for believing the idea that we're actually changing the world. But I really think that's what drives me. It's what drives my team, is that by doing the work we're doing, by bringing really diverse companies together, number one, we're helping individuals grow by creating that connectivity. And I think you understand that because that's what Fintech Meetup does.
Yeah.
We're also fundamentally giving everybody an opportunity to present much more than just the company they are, to have an opinion and an impact on a much greater ecosystem, a much greater platform than they would have unto themselves. And that's what a good trade association tries to do. And especially as we've grown, it's different when you're 30 companies and 30 members versus 150, right? Your ability to create those interconnected moments and opportunities really have increased. And that's really been the benefit for our membership. And more importantly, we're being even better received on the government and regulatory policy side than we have ever been before. And that's not just because of the change in administration, because I think that also goes into certain states where they may have been hesitant and or resistant to innovation. We're seeing more and more of an adoption and welcoming from those states who want to work with us and build a better ecosystem.
And I think you also, for example, you mentioned the shutdown. What is fintech doing for the community? I like even beyond sort of fintech becoming relevant for, let's say, legislators, and it's also more relevant for the population in general, and which probably has a bit of a, a bit of a feedback loop there.
Yeah, I often use the example, I bank different than my father banked, and my daughter banks different than I bank, and her kids are going to bank different than her.
Yeah.
Which means there needs to be a fundamental evolution in the way banking works. The idea that, once upon a time, my parents used to write checks, right? Today, my mom will write a check still, give it to me so I can put it into my bank account and then transfer it into my daughter's apps, right? My daughter will never understand what a bank is. And so when you think about what fintech is, it's not a nuanced sort of out there idea. That is what banking was, or traditional banking was 20, 30, 40 years ago. That is what consumers are demanding. And so there are those who are going to resist, right? And unfortunately, those who generally are speaking for themselves, and I say this, there are certain consumer advocate groups who like to pretend they're there to serve some sort of that consumer group or serve on behalf of some consumers, which quite frankly are there just to sort of perpetuate their own existence. And quite frankly, consumers today are demanding, they're not asking, they're demanding for access to financial services on their phones. They want to see financial service in real time, not near real time. They want to see the money move instantly, right? Yeah. Which means we've got to make sure that we're keeping consumers safe, right? We do not compromise on consumer safety, but at the same time, companies are looking and finding new ways to serve those consumers. And quite frankly, we need to work together to ensure that we're offering those services to the consumers who are demanding it.
When I looked at your LinkedIn profile, I loved your headline. Not all fintechs are created equal. Can you explain that?
Yeah, so it's that, even that one sentence has evolved over time because you go into a member of Congress's office or to the legislature in Wisconsin, right? And you're there to talk about some nuanced approach. And the response you get is, "Oh, I know what fintech is. I've heard of Bitcoin, right?" And where this idea that all fintech goes into a big bowl and becomes a salad. And today, I don't have to tell you whether it's virtual currency or digital assets, whether it's AI, right? Whether it's earned wage access or buy now, pay later. There are some who look at that and say, "Oh, that's all fintech." But each one of them requires a significant amount of understanding and nuance and deep dive to understand how it works, what it does, how consumers interact with it. But then this is something my friend Carrie Ransom at BankTech Ventures, who I know that she taught me something as well. Not all fintech is fintech because there are other entities within tech, like bank tech, right? Or regulatory technology, or supervisory technology, or operational technology, right?
Yeah.
Which all go to serve the financial services ecosystem, but are not financial technology, right?
Yeah.
They're regulatory technology,
Yeah.
operational, right? Your
Yeah.
regulatory, supervisory technology. And so, when I first wrote that on my LinkedIn page, not all fintech is created equal, I was really trying to bifurcate, again, different products within fintech.
Yeah.
And even within those products, good actors and bad actors, right?
Yeah.
Like there's some people who will say, oh, we're here to serve consumers,
Yeah.
when we all know that they're to serve themselves,
Mm.
right? And so those are the two. But again, as the industry has grown, I've learned that there are many ways to bifurcate sort of how you think about what fintech is and how do you sort of draw the lines so we can make it clear to policymakers and regulators who we are on any given day, what we're trying to accomplish. And so I can advocate for one position in one vertical and advocate for a different position on a different day with another vertical because the products are inherently different.
Yeah.
But to the common, to Mr. Public on the street,
Yeah.
it just seems like one big thing. And
Yeah.
oftentimes a big part of our job is educating not just consumers, but educating policymakers and regulators. What are the differences? What are the nuances? And how do you ultimately bifurcate who are the good actors trying to serve consumers and who are those who continue to find new ways just to scam? Scammers and fakers don't take a break. And so we have to work just as hard to educate consumers, policymakers, and regulators at the same time.
Last fall, I spoke to my congressman who unfortunately passed away. But he was on the cybersecurity committee in Congress, and one of the things that he told me that really struck me is he's like, when the doors are closed and we're just like talking to each other, you can't tell who's in which party. And from the financial services perspective, is that would you believe that that's something similar, or is there still a bit of that confrontation?
It's a great question. Every single month, we do an all-member call where we will host a regulator or a member of Congress. And I joke, when we first started this a few years ago, I used to joke with every member, could fintech be the thing that breaks through the bipartisanship that we work together on? And I go back, this is sort of one of the earliest meetings that we had, and we hosted Congressman Patrick McHenry at the time. He says, Phil, I know you meant that as a joke, but I think the answer may be yes. And he starts to tell me about how he was working with Maxine Waters on digital asset policies. And this is going back a few years. And we actually sort of made significant progress on that specific bill. And if you go behind closed doors and you turn off the cameras and you ask members about what they're trying to accomplish, every member of Congress will say the same thing. They're trying to serve their constituents the best way they know how. And there are obviously ideological divides that are big issues that divide members. But behind closed doors, they're trying to move the ball forward. And we have found, and I even to this day, just last month, I made the exact same joke. Can fintech be the thing that brings you together? And they said, Phil, it's not can it be, it is the thing that has brought us together. And you saw it once again. And I without giving too much credit to digital assets, but the demand that I think regulators and policymakers were seeing from their constituents made them think twice about what they were doing and how they were doing it. So whether you were a Democratic member of Congress or a Republican member of Congress, when you went back to your district, consumers were asking, your voters were asking you, what are we doing about AI? What are we doing about digital assets? How are we going to make sure it's safe? And so when they went back to Washington, there was a real mandate, Democrat and Republican, to work together. And I'm so excited now, especially that we have, I say, regulators, acting chairman Travis Hill at the FDIC, control of the currency, Jonathan Gould, Mickey Bowman at the Federal Reserve. We have regulators who are meeting the moment of the day and seizing on that opportunity to not just build bipartisan sort of divide and build bipartisan regulations, but to figure out how do we build consensus and build something today that will actually last. And that goes hand in hand with what I talked about earlier in terms of what the American Fintech Council is trying to do. We're trying to meet the moment at the same time. And we are excited because there is this amazing convergence of all these things happening at the same time where it doesn't have to matter about politics. In a year from now and 2 years from now, it doesn't matter who gets elected next. We've built something that is sound, that is real, that is exciting, that is going to drive the policy that protects my daughter, enables her to access, protects my grandchildren and their grandchildren.
Oh, that's a great point. I love that. I wanted to ask you a bit about your FinTech Meetup experience. Can you talk a little bit about that and how was it?
Yeah, I think like most people, and I think this is my third or fourth year going to Fintech Meetup.
Yeah.
I think like most people, when I first started attending Fintech Meetup maybe 4 years ago, I was skeptical. I was skeptical about the app. I was skeptical about scheduling meetings. Am I really going to get the meetings that I scheduled? Are people going to show up? Are people going to participate? What I've learned at a trade association, we're only as strong as our ability to engage our membership. I think Fintech Meetup walked into the system the same way. People need to participate. And you didn't just hope and pray that they would. You really engaged. You talked to your participants. What do you need? How would it help? What do you think is the right format? And I remember going to that first trip to Vegas, sort of very skeptical about what I was going to get out of it. And I came back and I said, what I started with this afternoon was this quickly became my best and favorite event of the year, just because it's not just meeting for meeting's sake. It's meaningful opportunities, not just to meet someone passing in a hall or set up something at Starbucks, right? But to sit down at a table to talk for 15 minutes and learn very quickly. Is this someone who I want to talk to for more? Or is this someone who, like, it was great, I wanted to meet them, but there is no further conversation necessary. And I think my first year I did 8 meetings. My second year I did 12, and I've been trying to max out the last couple. Where I really, to me, it's one of the most important things I do. And not to minimize some of the content, because I think oftentimes I love to see who's speaking on the main stage or what are some of the panel presentations, but getting the opportunity to sit down face to face in real life person with someone who maybe it's hard to get a meeting with, it's hard to find times to get your schedules aligned. It's what Fintech Meetup has done different than anybody else and has done it much better than anybody else. And that's not to take away from other conferences. I think everybody sort of has found their lane in the ecosystem. I think Fintech Meetup has really carved out a place of its own and has really stood out amongst the pack as a place to build real meaningful relationships. And it aligns so cleanly with what we do at the American Fintech Council. And it's why it's been such an honor to partner with you and the organization to make sure that we can grow it even larger as we move forward.
Well, the honor is definitely mutual. So I really enjoy working with you.
Thank you.
When I looked at your background and all of the different things that you've done, you've reinvented yourself multiple times. Is there a common thread throughout? And obviously, you're a person that looks ahead. Like what might be the next reinvention?
So I wish I could tell you what the next thing is, but I couldn't tell you before my last reinvention what this one was going to be. There is a common thread, and I encourage everybody to follow the same methodology: is find what you love to do and dive into it with both feet. And then hopefully have a family that is supportive that allows you to do that. But I could tell you, through my political career, which took me to the city of New York, to Washington, D.C., to Albany, to serve as an actual elected official, and then think to myself, I can do even more, right? Where many have said, you've reached your pinnacle, right? The idea for me was, how else can I change the world? How else can I really make an impact on the future? And fintech for me specifically was exactly that path. When I served in office, I represented a community that was devastated during Hurricane Sandy right here in New York. And one of the biggest challenges and the weakest points was our financial services ecosystem. The infrastructure, could not handle it. And communities struggled for months and months and months, whether it was with their mortgage or their bank accounts or access to their finances. To me, I looked at and said, how do I change the world outside of elected office? And fintech was the answer for me. How do we modernize the financial services system to ensure that we're maintaining the safety, the security, the consumer protection, but we're enabling and encouraging innovation to change the future of the world? And I've loved every job I've ever held, and I still do. I hope I'll be here for a while, but if not, I hope the next job and the next opportunity is something that I'm going to bring an equal passion and equal love for.
I'm sure you will. And I also have no doubt you will have an even greater impact.
Thank you.
And once again, it's been a pleasure. And thank you for joining us today.
Thank you.